Joining us now on the Rich Eisen Show is the perennial Emmy Award winner, one of the best in the business, getting set to call the final game of the regular season. So much on the line for the Bills and the Dolphins on NBC and Peacock Sunday night. Cris Collinsworth back on the program. Happy New Year, Chris. How are you, sir?
Happy New Year, brother. It's good to see that you didn't permanently disappear. I was watching the show last week, and you guys were kind of popping on and off the screen. I was getting a little nervous. I thought I was going to lose a couple of my boys out of that show.
No.
Good to see you back.
It was no humans were harmed in the making of that broadcast, Chris.
That's great. That's great. I was nervous.
The magic of television. All right, let's just jump into this one first up, and then obviously we'll get to the game that you're calling. On this program on Friday, we have a segment called What's More Likely, and I'm going to throw a What's More Likely to you right off the bat. Which team is more likely from last year's Super Bowl to flip a switch and go on a run? The Chiefs or the Eagles, Chris?
Good question.
Thank you.
I'm going to say... the Eagles because it just feels a little less likely to me, and I think the NFC is a little easier path than the AFC. I'm not positive about that, but it feels like when it's conceivable a team like the Buffalo Bills could end up a 7 seed,
yes,
6 seed, whatever, that's a little frightening. And or the Miami Dolphins could end up in that same position. So I think the path is a little tougher in the AFC. I don't think anybody has really distinguished themselves. And other than San Francisco, it just feels like that, in the NFC, it feels like any of them could come out of there. So, I mean, we've only got one team at this point, right? That it's theirs to lose right now, and that's the Baltimore Ravens. Everybody else I think they've got a shot.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into your response there, starting with the Chiefs. I understand, again, if the Dolphins lose the game you're calling on Sunday night with Mike Tirico and the rest of the crew, the Dolphins wind up in Arrowhead. It's entirely possible that the Bills lose this game and other scenarios break on Saturday and earlier on Sunday to make them the 6th seed and go back to the spot where they had just won thanks to Kadarius Toney's foot in part. What ails the Chiefs that could be fixable, do you think?
Well, really, they've been riding their defense all season long. I mean, this is the team leading the league in sacks, and I think their secondary is really, really good. I mean, L'Jarius Sneed, Trent McDuffie, those guys have just been making plays all year long, really for the last several years, and they can get after you on both ends, right? They've got a good rush, and they've got a great player in Chris Jones, and they've got some tremendous talent in the secondary. So I love starting with defense because nobody ever does. Like when I do preseason prognostications, I always go, all right, let me figure out who has the best defense, and nobody else will pay attention to it. That's the way that it always works. So, but anytime you're telling me the big problem with the Kansas City Chiefs is what they're doing on offense, then I'm like, okay, that's possible that could be fixed, right?
Right. Yeah.
Tell my wife that I'll call her later and she'll be thrilled with that.
There you go, Chris. You're talking to Rich Eisen on the Rich Eisen Show. You lay down the law. That's it, Chris. Well done.
She lays it down often, so I don't know.
But no, I hear you. But Mahomes has got to throw it to someone, right? And the tackles appear to be turnstiles a little bit too often around.
But to some extent they were a year ago. And I think it's one of the things that's happened this year, Rich, is that Kansas City last year really became uber talented at chipping both edges and then getting Travis Kelce out into the route, right? And so they were getting the protection they needed, and they were getting a player like Kelce who was just running 3 or 4 yards down the field, get him the ball, he's making somebody miss, and he's making great plays down the field. So the problem is everybody stole it. I mean, it's all over the league right now. Everybody's doing a little bit of the same thing. So they figured out how to play it. They figured out how to defend it and the whole thing. But I still feel like with Pacheco that the Chiefs have plenty at the running back position. Mahomes and Kelce can go off at any time. I always say, I love Rashee Rice. I think he's a tough nut. I just think he's a hard guy to tackle. And Kadarius Toney, in my mind, I saw him play at Florida. I've seen him in the NFL. I saw him in the Super Bowl. If you want to say, is there any human being that could flip a switch and all of a sudden be unstoppable? Yeah, and my line on him is always, if you played a game of tag with the entire National Football League, Kadarius Toney would win. He would win. Like, nobody can just grab him in open space. So I always look at that as, it's all the art of the possible. Their interior three offensive line is good as any in football, maybe the best. Yeah, I would say the Chiefs.
And then let's turn to the Eagles, Cris Collinsworth. You last saw them on the Week 14 Sunday night in Dallas. Perhaps, again, you're wearing your PFF hat, literally. Maybe you can figuratively wear your Pro Football Focus hat with an answer to the question of what does ail this team? What is wrong with the Eagles, Chris?
I think that's a harder question for me because I look at them. AJ and Devontae outside as good as they get. They got Goddard back. Jalen Hurts, I think, has been a little dinged up all year. I don't think he's been completely right. DeAndre Swift has given them some big play ability, but this offensive line has consistently been one of the best in all of football. So it's a little bit harder for me to come up with a legitimate answer on that side. They've been through a lot now on the defensive side. Had to switch defensive coordinators sort of in the middle of the year with Desai going out and Matt Patricia coming in. And so that was a little bit of a shakeup. But they've lost so many games on the last drive. I mean, you think about the last month of the season, the last drive is where they're losing, and that's where they were winning a year ago, all except the Super Bowl. And I always think it's hard when you're coming back and you had played in the Super Bowl the year before. Like, the regular season's almost boring. It's almost like, God, just get me to where, I can make another run at this. And it's 4 months of just pain and suffering. And, it's just, and now you're finally there. And the teams that have been there before, Philadelphia playing on the road in the first couple of rounds of the playoffs is not going to unnerve them, right? Kansas City is not going to get unnerved. So I think they both have a chance, but I've been watching a lot of Baltimore. We saw them a couple of weeks ago against Jacksonville, and now I was watching them against Miami, studying for the game this weekend. And Baltimore can beat you every way possible. There's nothing that team can't do. And short of some disaster happening, somewhere, it just feels like it's theirs to lose this year.
Yeah, we had Patrick Queen on Thursday's show, Chris, and he mentioned how he sees Lamar has full grasp of the playbook right now. And so what do you see on film or when you have personally eyeballed the Ravens that is different about their offense and Lamar, who I imagine is going to be the MVP of this campaign? What do you have for me on that one?
Yeah, if he doesn't win the MVP, I don't know what anybody's watching out there. It's the best team. He's the best player on the best team, and he literally drags them. I think the number one thing, and I could list out 20, I think, but the number one thing is his ability to keep a play alive inside the pocket for 6, 7, 8 seconds. And when you're playing defense against the kind of guys that he has that can get down the field and make plays, and his receivers are much, much better than what they were a season ago. When you're talking about that kind of production and you've got to protect it for like 8 seconds, it's literally impossible. And then even if you do, cover them for 8 seconds down the field, that means you've got 6 people in the secondary chasing 5 receivers around. And now Lamar is going to run for 40 yards on you. And the teams that can take all of their wideouts or running backs or whatever and spread them out across the field and can still beat you with the quarterback running the football, the Buffalo Bills, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, you just go right down the list. It almost feels unfair. I mean, it really does. Jalen, it just feels like there's three things you have to defend now on defense, and that's too many.
Now, again, and I think, the Ravens are the best team in football. We're seeing it. They've definitely proved it against the 49ers on Christmas night. However, again, you saw the 49ers on Thanksgiving night. Were you there Thanksgiving night, or is that the one that you were not in the booth for that one Thanksgiving night?
Thanksgiving night, yes.
You were. Correct. Okay. I don't remember your schedule completely because I know you didn't do both games that week. But so you were there on Thanksgiving night. You saw them destroy Seattle. I mean, they ruined their Thanksgiving. Then you saw what they did against Philadelphia, Seattle, and then they almost completed 5 in a row bird teams, and then they ran into the Ravens buzzsaw. Does that, and you've said multiple times, it's the Ravens Super Bowl essentially run to lose. Where do you put the 49ers in this whole thing? Did that one loss kind of throws you off them right now?
Well, I go right back to the thing we originally talked about, and that is the AFC just that much better?
Right.
I mean, we came into the season and our theory was the AFC is better. It's just better. And I think it's proven itself out over the course of the season. If you look at the overall record, the AFC has won a lot more games against the NFC than vice versa. So my question going into that Baltimore game was, it looks like the 49ers are the better team, or is it that the Baltimore Ravens have slugged their way through an incredibly tough AFC North with, Cincinnati hasn't won a game yet in the AFC North. In Pittsburgh, you know what they've got on defense. Cleveland, you know what they've got on defense. And if you're battle tested and hardened through that division and you come out the other end, San Francisco scares the heck out of everybody on defense. I'll bet it doesn't scare the heck out of Baltimore, And again, when you're trying to rush 4, which is what San Francisco does, they've made a great living off of rushing 4 and playing coverage over the years, but you can't do that. You're leaving open. There are always 6 lanes, right? You have to cover when you're pass rushing. And if you rush 4, you only got 4 of them covered. And that, he's going to find one of them. And it's too much to defend. So I'm sticking to my theory that the AFC is a little tougher. It doesn't mean that Dallas or Philly or San Francisco or whoever, maybe the Rams, who are getting hot, that won't come up and be the hot team that wins it all. But going into it, I think the AFC has been better. 2
last questions for you, Cris Collinsworth, and I'll let you go on with your day. Let's start with the game you're calling on Sunday night, the Buffalo Bills at the Miami Dolphins. The stakes are right there on the table. Dolphins are either the 2 seed with potentially 2 home games winning the AFC East, or they're the 6 seed going to Kansas City. Buffalo's all over the map. It is entirely possible that the Ravens win on Saturday night. The Saturday night game between the Texans and the Colts does not end in a tie, and the Jaguars win earlier in the day on Sunday, which means the Bills are either the 2 seed or they're out. That is wild. Like, you could be walking into the booth with Mike Tirico on Sunday night with that being the case. So what do you think is going to happen based on what you're seeing so far? What's your analysis of Bills and Dolphins, Cris?
I think you have to start with the Bills defense. I mean, they had a monster performance last time out. Rasul Douglas has come over in that trade from Green Bay and just made such a difference. And he stands to benefit from the fact that Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer in the secondary have been there forever, right? They understand Sean McDermott's defense inside and out, and literally just talk his way through everything. And he's had, I want to say, 4 interceptions. Rich, in the game the other day, I don't know if you saw it or not, he had like a tip pass, an interception, a tip pass that created another interception, and then a pick 6. I mean, it was the most dominant quarter I've ever seen in my entire life. And they had to have him. Remember, Tre'Davious White got hurt early in this year. And so when they were really struggling, they were trying to get cornerback play. And Rasul Douglas, he did the same thing in Green Bay. You remember when he first went to Green Bay? It seems like he had 6 interceptions in the second half of the season there, and really carried that football team through. Plus, they got Daquan Jones, who's been out, I want to say, since
he got hurt. He got hurt in the London game I called against Jacksonville with Matt Milano.
That's exactly right. And Matt Milano is still out, but Daquan Jones is back. And Daquan Jones now gives them that nose tackle sort of power that lets Ed Oliver go run wild. And Ed Oliver is finally becoming what I think a lot of us thought he was going to be coming out of college. And I'm not comparing him to Aaron Donald, but that's the style of player that he is. And he can be really good inside. The other guy, I mean, there's so many sort of unknown guys on this team. Terrell Bernard, their middle linebacker, this guy has like 6.5 sacks. He leads them in tackles, 3 forced fumbles, 3 interceptions. He's really become the leader of that defensive team. And over the last month, even with Von Miller doing nothing, Von Miller, he was a healthy scratch last week. He's not healthy or he'd be playing,
right.
But he didn't play in the game. But they really got, I don't want to say lucky, but Leonard Floyd was just sitting out there, right? And he's had like right around 10 sacks every year, year after year after year. The Rams had to let him go, and but he's come in and double-digit sacks again, and he sort of replaced the production of Von Miller. So the first and foremost, it's about the Bills' defense in my mind. And then who's playing for Miami? Is Jalen Waddle playing? Is Raheem Mostert playing? Do we get Achane again, who was brilliant in the game last week? He looked great. They're a little thin on the offensive line. They've lost some people up front there. So, and the other thing, Miami really has not had a big offensive day yet against a good team. Mm-hmm. They had a pretty good day, I guess, against Dallas. I really didn't even get to see anything but the highlights of that one. But they're not beating good teams. They're beating up bad teams. And so now you're going to go against a top 3 defense in one of the biggest games of the year. But you want to do flip side of that. Each of these teams are, I want to say, 7-1 at home this season. So you think about the magnitude of this game for both these teams, even Miami. If Miami gets to play, wins the game, becomes a 2 seed, and now everybody but the 1 seed has to run through Miami, all of a sudden I like Miami a little bit more. Same's true of Buffalo. If it's a number 2 seed, Buffalo, and I know Cincinnati went in there and beat them last year, but history has shown that they are tough to beat at home. The other thing history has shown us is that the Buffalo Bills typically beat the Miami Dolphins. I want to say it's like 11 out of the last 12. Josh Allen has torn them up. So somehow, some way, they've got to overcome that, and they've got to overcome it without their 2 best pass rushers. Jalen Phillips was hurt early on in the season, and Bradley Chubb out with
those are killers. Those are crush. Those are killers.
And both of them. Both those guys got hurt at the end of meaningless 21-point lead the first time for Phillips, and game completely out of control this past week with Baltimore.
Terrible. Well, that's Sunday night, you and Tirico. So last one for you, Chris. We don't get to choose which games we call, as we all know. The vagaries of the television, sports TV, and NFL in charge of the TV gods. We don't choose, but. And we also don't know what the scenarios are yet for the playoffs. There are 3 possible playoff games that are out there, and I want to know which one would you want to call. You would want to be there. You want to be in the booth, and here are your 3 choices. Tyreek Hill returns to Arrowhead. That's one. Okay. Dolphins, Chiefs, that's good. Matthew Stafford returns to Detroit to take on Jared Goff, taking on the Rams.
Ooh, I like that.
And then it's entirely possible the Browns wind up on divisional playoff weekend with Joe Flacco to Baltimore to try and one and done the Lamar Jackson Ravens. Which one would you want to be in the building, in the booth for to call?
Oh, wow.
Chris?
I mean, Joe Flacco going back to Baltimore is really, I mean, Joe Flacco
With the Browns, by the way,
still,
not just with anybody, with the Browns, too.
yeah. But Joe Flacco, his 4-game run in the playoffs to win the Super Bowl and MVP was the most unbelievable thing I think I've ever seen. I mean, I've never seen a guy get hotter during one stretch than what he did. But something about Matthew Stafford going to Detroit and the Lions, you know, that's pretty good right there. That is pretty good one right there. I think I'd take that one.
I bet. Okay, there you go. Great to see you, Chris. Just as always, I like to mention it whenever you and I get to talk here. I saw Belichick in Denver prior to Christmas Eve, Patriots and Broncos, and he's the one who brought up NFL 100, the all-time team show, and how much he loved working with you and everybody else there. He's still talking about it. Years later.
You know, it was a fun day. But to see the way the players and coaches that came on interacted with him, I still think it touched him in some way. Now he would throw up if he heard me say that. But, you know, I just think that he was almost surprised. You know, he's such a live in a cave kind of guy. And the amount of respect he got that day, or those, whatever it was, 3 days, whatever long we were there. I think it really kind of got to him a little bit. And it doesn't surprise me. It's a great memory for him.
That and the fact that he acted like a kid in a candy store with some of the old school guys coming around too. Like us watching that, you know.
Well, the work that he did on those older players.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, I learned a lot that day because a lot of that footage only NFL Films has. And it was just great. I mean, you and I are addicts, you know. We would do it for fun. You know, you don't have to pay us to do what we're doing, but you know, for Bill, it's even something bigger than that. You know, it's from his father to the academies to, you know, it's his life. It's just his absolute life. It's not fun to watch this year happen, right? You know, because people go, oh, Tom Brady. And, you know, Tom is the greatest player of all time. And we all know that. And everybody's a better coach when you have Tom Brady. So I wouldn't mind seeing him have one more go at it. You know, I'd just like to see him one more time with a really top end quarterback.
Chris, thanks for the time. Have a great Sunday night. Everyone should check out Pro Football Focus at this time of year, certainly the playoffs. And then once the season's over, we'll talk draft. Your crew's nonstop. So thanks for the time.
You're the best, Rich. Good talking to you.
Right back at you. That's Cris Collinsworth. Check out Sunday Night Football. Final game of the season, Bills-Dolphins. Chris with Mike Tirico and the crew, NBC and Peacock on Sunday night. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern for free.